Chapter 14, Practical Ministry. These last few chapters are very important. I'm not going to try to give any in-depth lecture on these because it's so important that you read and meditate on the different points I've given. But I am going to give you some personal experiences and hopefully things that will help you. Chapter 14 talks about how to enter a pastorate. Now, this is not talking about starting a church. This is talking about taking a church that's already established. There's a church, it may have a few people, it may have a good-sized people, but they have been established for some time. They even have their own building and whatever, and they have heard about you. You've been used of God maybe in some services or things, or maybe you've been pastoring somewhere else. Maybe you started a church somewhere else, and they've sent somebody to talk to you. They're interested in you coming and preach for them because they're looking for a pastor. And so out of that, after you were there, you felt like God was moving you there, and God made them feel the same way. And so they issued you an invitation to become a pastor. Now, let me say something before we get started with anything else. There is a difference in pastoring an established work and pastoring a work that you have apostolically and prophetically started yourself, or you've started with the help of an apostle and a prophet. World of difference, okay? And believe me, if I had the choice, I would always take one to start than to take one that's been there. Always, always. But if you feel led to take a church that's already been established, then there's some things that I want to give you that will help you be successful in the time that you're there. The first thing is, of course, besides knowing that God's called you there, is you have to become a servant more than ever. And they have to believe that you are there to serve, to serve. You see, you lead by serving. And when doing that, you got to also accept where they are. You say, well, I'm not Baptist, but, I think I can bring them some truths they haven't heard, and I'm taking a Baptist church. Listen, if you take that Baptist church, if you take that Methodist church, if you take that Pentecostal Holiness Church of God in Christ, whatever else, you must submit to the order that's upon that church. You don't have any right to go in and tear that church up because you think you're going to make them believe like you believe or receive like you receive or whatever else. If you take an established church, the first order is to realize, now you may be used of God to change them greatly over time. But when you take it, you've got to respect the order that you're walking into. You say, well, I don't believe the deacons should be telling the pastor what to do. They're supposed to be helping the pastor serve the pastor. Well, understand, that's what they've been doing for the last 30 or 40 years. They've been telling the pastor what to do. And because they've been taught that the deacons rule the church. So just understand, you may be able to change that over several years. But you can't go in there and think the first few months you're going to argue with them over who's the boss and what you're going to do. You take a church that's established, you accept the order that is there, okay? And you come in with the attitude of serving, You're there to win souls, you're there to help them grow, and you don't want to cause a church split. You want to be a blessing in that situation, okay? Now, number 2, your first job is to win the confidence of the leadership. You already have confidence to a degree because they voted you in.
Yep.
They're a voting church, and I don't believe in voting churches, but they're a voting church, and they voted you in, and so you know they've accepted you. They've shown some confidence. Now, understand, if you want them to help you and to serve you, you got to start by showing them you're a servant. You know what I did when I took my first little church? My first little church was a Methodist church. And I wasn't but about 21 years old. I went to college at 16, graduated at 19, and then God called me into the ministry around 20 years old. And at 21, God had me pastor a little Methodist church in the country. And when I got there, they were really worn out. They'd gone through several pastors, and there wasn't but about 20 or 30 people in church on Sunday morning. And the place had not been kept up. So I started cleaning. And I cleaned the bathrooms like they were brand new. I cleaned that. I spent a whole week cleaning that little country church. The next Sunday, people came up to me and they said, somebody has been cleaning in here. I hadn't seen the women's restroom that clean in years. I said, yeah, I did it. You did it? Yeah. I said, listen, I'm here to serve. I'm here to, and I'm hoping that you're here to serve too. I said, that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to be the pastor. I'm not here to be the man. I'm here to represent Jesus. And I said, I'll do whatever needs to be done. Those people started getting behind me. We had work days. We painted those buildings. We cleaned all the flower beds up. We got the whole place looking good. They had a cemetery beside it. We cleaned up the cemetery. Because once they see you're a servant, they're ready to get in there and serve with you. See what I'm saying? But you're going to say, okay now, folks, we need to have a work day and I need y'all to show up. Well, you're going to see not many people show up. You just go ahead and start doing it. You just fall right in and you start working and you start doing things. And then I asked for a roll. They had over 100 people on the roll, but there's only 25 or 30 there. I said, I want a roll and I want addresses and I want you to give me directions. And I started, and over 2 or 3 months, I visited every home on that roll. I went to every one of them. I introduced myself. I told them I really wish they'd pray about coming and visit on Sunday morning. They haven't been there a long time. They are on the church roll, and I'm asking them to please come, and they did. And did you know, in 1 year, we went from 30 to over 100 people in church on an average every Sunday morning, way out in the country, because of serving, with a doing. Now, understand that in the leadership, there are people who want to control you. They want you to go every Friday night with them, go after church every Sunday with them, whatever else. Try to avoid that. If you're married, of course, it's easier. If you're single like I was, they know you don't have anybody to cook for you, then they really... So, you be careful that you don't find yourself locked in with 1 or 2 families, because they may be innocent in their hearts, or they may not be. They may, want to help control the pastor. I don't know. But still, you're there for everybody. The third thing, do not allow 1 or 2 to try to win your attention with gifts or flattery to divide you from the others. And when it comes to the point that somebody on the board says, well, he's your friend, then that right there shows you failed in that particular area. You need to have everybody on that board in your friend. And you need to treat them the same. You need to treat the leadership with special attention. You need to try to plan times for you together with all of them. Maybe once a month, meet at a local restaurant with their families, and all of you together. Have a cookout or whatever. But you need time with them as a group. Now, the next thing is be diligent in your study of the Word. There's nothing worse than a sorry preacher. I don't like sorry preachers. In fact, I think if you can't preach, you shouldn't be in the pulpit. That's just nothing worse than a boring preacher who I'll go and I think, oh God, another Sunday I got to listen to this. And they wander here and they wander there and they talk a little bit about this. And they just talk. Sometimes they don't care about the time. They just keep you there all day long if you weren't there doing like this constantly in the service. And they're seeing you do that and get the message that maybe it's time to stop or whatever. You need to be diligent in the Word. And also criticism. Don't reject criticism out of hand. Take it, pray about it, and see if there's something in it that might be true that you can help that, okay? Now, until you are established as a servant, you will not be able to lead. You hear that? Until it's clearly that you're there to serve, you're not going to be able to say, okay, guys, let's do this, let's do that. Now, number 7 is look for weaknesses in the program. And here's what I want to tell you. Do not criticize anything they've done. Okay? Remember, they may have built that church, or their fathers and mothers may have built that church. They may have tithed all these years. They may not have had a pastor with the little smart ideas that you've got and the little things that can really make it grow and so forth. So you don't get in there at a board meeting and start saying, well, I see that y'all have always done it this way, but I'm telling you right now, this is the way to do it or whatever. You leave that alone for a while. You develop a relationship first, and then you begin to develop in areas of changing. You know what, I find it very important to make people feel like they've done the best they could do. You know, and when you have a chance, you throw a word in. Well, y'all sure have. They start telling you about how they've had church splits. Well, you know, y'all have really been strong in the Lord. I'm so proud of you. I'm glad I got men like that around me. And things like that. You build them up. You don't tear them down, make them think they hadn't been doing like they should, hadn't been tithing like they should, or whatever else. You just share the word and let God do the criticizing. Number 8, pastoring is about people, their lives. It's not about you. Okay? It's about them. So when you share your personal illustrations, make sure you're sharing it to make a point in the Word that they too can experience the same thing in the Word. It's not about you just talking about you. You need to be tied to the Word, and there's something that you're helping them with this illustration and not just trying to make you look like you're the greatest thing since whoever, Jesus Christ. Another thing is, if you want to change people, they need to be educated. And one of the ways to educate people is start a lending library. You can have a table at the front of the church. You can have books in there about the Holy Spirit, about healing, about different things, where they can sign a book out and bring it back. And then you can have DVDs. And you could have Joyce Meyers and different ones that they could take home and listen to and come back. So, see, you only get maybe that 30 minutes on Sunday morning. But through the books and through the DVDs and the CDs, you may get another 2 or 3 hours with them every week, teaching them the principles you want to teach them about faith or prosperity or healing or fasting or whatever. You lay that material out and encourage them to start taking it home with them, putting that CD in the car and listening to it on the way to work. I'll put that DVD on at nighttime and sometime and listen once or twice a week to some famous minister who's preaching on the subject you want your people to know about. I encourage you to educate the congregation. And finally, spend a lot of time in prayer. A lot of time in prayer. Now, do we have time to do another lecture as part of this series? All right, we're going to tie these 2 lectures together then. Chapter 15. And chapter 15 is how do I establish a work for God? Now notice the last chapter was how do I enter into a pastorate, meaning, and it could not just be a church, it could be an organization or whatever else. When you come in as a servant, you come in with ideas but not criticism, and you take time to build relationships so what you do say is received, okay? This is for the person who feels like God wants me to start a ministry. I feel like I need to have a ministry to battered women. I feel like I need to have a ministry to men who are battling alcoholism. I think I need to have a ministry to men who are on drugs. I think I need to have a ministry to young people and have some kind of a youth group. I love music. I'd like to form a community youth group or youth choir. I'm going to start one here, and I'm going to talk to the other pastors that maybe once a month in their ministers of music, we could rotate working with them and build a large youth choir or something that we can do with you. You know, you're starting a ministry, and it may be starting a church. Now, there are all kinds of ministries. But whatever your vision is, listen to me very carefully. Number 1, if it's not a church, you need to be tied to a local church. If you are not the pastor of that church that you're starting, you need to be tied to a pastor. And number 4, if you're founding a church, you need to be tied to a prophet or an apostle who can help guide you, someone who has started churches already and have that experience. You do not go about on your own. Whatever the vision is, you should always be tied to the local church. If you're a pastor, of course, you're tied to your local church that you started. But if you have any other kind of ministry, always tie yourself to a local church. That is so important. Why? Well, first of all, it's important for you because you need to be fed.
Growth.
Second of all, if you have family, they need to be in a church. If you have a non-church ministry, if you have a ministry that's not actually a local church. This is very, very important that you do that. Whenever you feel the call from God, there are scriptural principles that will apply. And the book of Nehemiah is very important because it speaks to building the work of God. I share in my notes here that it was a time in the history of the people of God that Judah had been captured by Babylon. And the temple and the capital city of Jerusalem had been destroyed by the enemy. 70 years had passed, and God began to speak to men to rebuild what the enemy had destroyed. And there were 3 men that God spoke to in the Bible about this. First, Zerubbabel. He was sent by God to Jerusalem to lay the foundation of the temple. Then comes Ezra. He was to encourage the saints at Jerusalem to strengthen their faith. And finally, Nehemiah. He heard the voice of God, go to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls of the city. Now, you got to understand the most important thing that a village or a city in Bible days had was its wall. Its wall kept out wild animals. Its wall gave them some control on who's coming in, who's not coming in, because it'd always be a high wall, and they want to make sure that a band of robbers aren't coming in the middle of the night to pillage some homes there in the city and whatever. The wall was the most important thing. Your city could not be strong. Your people could not be protected. You could not, your property could not be protected without walled city. In fact, a lot of people would have a home in the city, and then they may have a farm somewhere where they worked the farm, and they would come back and keep the family at the city or whatever. In the first chapter of Nehemiah, he's weeping over the situation. He's praying. Every endeavor for the Lord, listen, every endeavor for the Lord is won or lost on the battlefield of prayer. Every endeavor for the Lord is won or lost on the battlefield of prayer. Now, Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. And you say, what does that mean? Well, it means that he tasted all of his food. In other words, if anybody's going to try to kill the king with poison, Nehemiah would take the poison. And the king would have the person to be his cupbearer who he trusted more than anybody in the world. Can you imagine being trusted by the president more than the military leaders, more than the members of the cabinet, more than anybody else? If we were living in a day when it was common to poison people that way and you had a cupbearer, yet because the Lord's work was calling him, he was willing to deny his important position. Listen, I have known men. I remember in Darlington, South Carolina, there was a brother who had a big grocery store there, and he got filled with the Holy Spirit and started coming to my church, and he wanted me to come over to a home meeting at his home. I got there, and the place was packed. He must have had 30-some people around that room. Well, I preached on the baptism of the Holy Ghost, and the Holy Spirit fell. I started going around the room. I didn't know that there was Presbyterian elders and Baptist deacons and all those kind of people that were friends of his because he was a well-known businessman. And so I ended up in the whole little town there, ended up being touched by these people who were filled with the Holy Ghost and everything else. And then he came to me one day and he says, God's called me to the mission field. He sold his beautiful home. He sold his business. Everything else went down to Guatemala. And he was down there for a couple of years. This is the early days of my ministry, so at that point I started the Bible college after he had left, or maybe even the first year, but he went on down. He was well educated. And so he called me. He said, I'm not making progress. I need some help. I want you to come down here. See, that's why you need apostles and prophets. So I went down there, and he told me, I can't seem to get a breakthrough. And I said, what's the problem? Well, a lot of problems. You got poverty. You got children that aren't being cared for and educated and no medical thing. I said, we're going after the children. We're going to start an Adopt the Child program. And I showed him how to start it, and he came to my church. We were the first ones to have people adopt by giving money towards a child going to school and all. And did you know the day came that his ministry grew? He had over 2,000 children who were being educated, who were being fed, who were being clothed, and from that and their families came, I think it was 13 churches were founded, all because he came to someone with apostolic vision to show him how to make it come to pass, and he did it. But he had to deny himself. He had to go down there and live in that situation. So he had divine authorization. If you're going to start a ministry, you got to make sure God's told you. You don't start a ministry on a goosebump. Okay? You don't start a ministry over hearing a gospel song and all of a sudden you feel like you just won't do anything for God, and so you just think of something and you take off to do it. You have got to know. Old Robert said this one time, I'll never forget it. They asked him, they said, how did you build this great university? How did you build the city of faith? How did you do all this? Here's what he said. He said, I prayed as if everything was up to God. And it is. But I worked like everything was up to me. Amen. Because faith without works is dead. And that's how old Roberts did it. And it's the same thing. Nobody knows the price and the suffering involved in starting a work for God. You will face false brethren. The one Nehemiah did. You will face people that want to they really want to kill you, but they can't do it because it's America. They just hate you. They're jealous of you, or you somehow got into their little domain and affected their life in some way. You got to have people guarding your back. And remember, when they built the walls, they had to clean out the rubbish. And you need to get the rubbish out there. There are people that just hang on to you, do nothing but eat your time up and get what money they can sponge off of you and whatever else. You got to put them on the right track, and that is start growing up and taking care of yourself. And I can't take care of everybody like they're babies. You keep your eyes on the prize and remember that God is your source. Amen? Amen. Amen. All right, chapter 16, we've come to the end of the book. Final things. On final things, I chose people from the Bible because these are people that you will meet in your ministry. First and foremost, we start out with Absalom. Absalom. One that you tried to help. One that you tried to bring up in ministry. And yet Absalom and all of his smiling and agreeing with you was after using you for his own gain. You'll come into an Absalom. A Jezebel. It could be a woman or a man. But if it's a woman, she has contempt for male spiritual authority. She may mask it in order to get into position, but really she does not. Paul didn't prohibit women from teaching. He prohibited women from usurping authority. There's a difference in having authority and usurping authority. Usurping authority is when you get in there, and I've seen sometimes pastors' wives do that to their husbands. You're going to tell him how to run the ministry. You're going to take over. You're going to be he's a Jezebel. You're Jezebel. Listen, he's the one that's the head of the ministry. He's the one that God's called. And sometimes you'll see that even with people in the body. Maybe they're on the board or something. And they want to get in there, and it may be a man, it may be a woman, but they want to tell you how to run the ministry. They want to feel like they can control you. There's a desire to have a control spirit that gets into people like that. It's very, very dangerous. And you'll see it coming out, and sometimes like Miriam and Aaron. Miriam and Aaron did not see spiritual authority. Listen, your pastor, or if you're a pastor, is human. And sometimes it may take him longer to see something than you see. Because maybe he's looking in a lot of different directions and you're focused and you see something. Pray for him. Trying to manipulate. Trying to humiliate. Trying to use authority of the board and rounding up some people to get your point across is not of God. He's the pastor. Respect him and start praying for him to see what it is that you feel like he's missing and what he wants to see. Now, Miriam and Aaron just came out and they just told it like it was. They said, look, Moses thinks he has the answer to everything. He thinks that he is just, the man. And we want him to know that we can have our say-so too, and we can get the church behind us, the camp of Israel, and we'll straighten some things out with Moses. And you know what God did? He struck them with leprosy. He struck them with leprosy. You need to understand, that man who got there just didn't get there by accident. Right. That man was called to God before he was ever born. Mm-hmm. Okay? Be careful in these situations. They forgot how far along he had brought them. They forgot all that Moses had done, and they were at a point that they wanted to have themselves heard. The next one I want to talk about is Alexander the coppersmith. Alexander the coppersmith speaks of someone maybe who's not a Christian. It could be, but not a Christian. And they say the coppersmith means he was a businessman, and he was apparently a very successful businessman, but he did not like it. Maybe Paul wouldn't bow down to him. Maybe he had ideas about the Old Testament scriptures, and he and Paul discussed it, and Paul wouldn't listen to him. I don't know. But he said everywhere Paul went, he was persecuted. And apparently Alexander had a lot to do with it. Maybe he was a Jewish guy who hated Paul because Jews were becoming Christians. I don't know. But he said, Satan has used him. And may he reap what he's sown, because he's constantly come against the ministry. They may resent it just because you have the hand of God upon your life. And they've always had all the attention. And now you've come in and your wife or your husband or whatever, they have got a lot of respect for this person and you don't like it. And then there's that Delilah spirit. There's always someone wanting to seduce a minister. And as soon as they do, you know what they're going to do? They're going to tell. Always do. Always do. Even if you're president of the United States and you have just, and a young woman has been allowed into the sacred office of the president and everything else, and you've gotten involved with her, and you think I'm the president of the United States. She's not going to go out and tell people what we've done. Yes, she is. They always do. They always tell. So don't think that you're going to get by with anything by giving in to a Delilah spirit. They will seduce you and turn around and say you seduce them. They will use you and turn around and say you use them. They will lead you in your flesh down the road of hell and turn around and say that you were leading them that way. That's why it works. It's a Delilah spirit. And then there's Gehazi. Gehazi is somebody on the staff who makes like he's representing you, but behind your back he's really representing himself. Oh, pastor doesn't really have time for this, but I'll be glad to sit down and help you. Now, they didn't say that because it's true pastor didn't have time. They want to establish themselves in front of the people. They want to take the people into themselves. They like Gehazi, run after the man and get the money. And they really like money. They like power. They like authority. They like recognition. And then we come up finally on Ananias and Sapphira. These are wealthy people that try to control the church. They want to use their money. I have lost some of the wealthiest people from my ministry through the years because I would not let them. I had one man who handed me $10,000 cash. I got to know him. He'd been giving gifts. He said, now, what do I have to do to get on the board? I said, well, our board is made up of people who are licensed or ordained ministers and have different areas of life they work in. Some work in business, but they serve the Lord. Some work just for the Lord or whatever. He says, you mean I can't get on your board? And I said, well, sir, you can be an advisor. We would love to have you as an advisor. I said, but I submit to spiritual leadership, to elders who are elders in the Lord, women who have ministries in the Lord. I said, I can't submit to a businessman. I can get advice from a businessman, and businessmen are a big help to us, and you've been a great help. Boy, he didn't like that at all. He thought he could buy himself a position on the board, and you can't do that. And finally, we end up with Mark. Now, Mark, we all pray that all these people will be like Mark. We all pray that these people will, they cause us so much trouble, and then they turn around and Paul says, send Mark to me. He'll be a blessing. And Mark ended up being a blessing. He started the Coptic church in Egypt. He wrote the book of Mark. He was a great blessing to the body of Christ, and I'm sure was a great blessing to Paul in his last days here on earth. But at one time, he wasn't a great blessing. And a lot of times when people let you down, you got to pray about it before you give them that second chance, because they'll do the same thing again. You got to seek the Lord. And so the time came that Mark had proved himself after deserting Paul when he needed him on the road. Okay, that story about Mark was the end of the chapter and the end of the book. Now, it's important that you understand that the lectures are just to encourage you. You're really the one who's doing the studying. You look up all these names of people you were given that you familiarize yourself with. You read the books, biographies. You do the other work. You read and report on the various things, everything that you're told that you're required to do. I want to encourage you because there's a reason. There's not one thing in this course that I have left out, have not left out, that was not there for a particular purpose. Everything has a purpose, and it's something that you will need. So I hope you've enjoyed practical ministry. I hope it'll make a difference in your life. God bless you, and I hope to see you in another one of the courses. God bless.